Just days left for the U.S. mission in Afghanistan to get Americans and Afghan allies out, while also bringing an end to the nearly 20-year presence of American troops in the country. The drawdown has already begun. At least 300 Marines have already left the country, even as the evacuations continue at a furious pace. 19,000 people have been evacuated in the past 24 hours. While that is far more than the 9,000 a day the Pentagon initially said they could manage, it is not clear how many Americans are still left in Afghanistan, not to mention the thousands of Afghans who played crucial roles in supporting the American war effort, who now fear violence and retaliation from the Taliban. The administration today giving us an update on the amount of Americans safely evacuated from Afghanistan and how many may still remain. Here's Secretary of State Tony Blinken.
Based on our analysis, starting on August 14, when our evacuation operations began, there was then a population of as many as 6,000 American citizens in Afghanistan who wanted to leave. Over the last 10 days, roughly 4,500 of these Americans have been safely evacuated, along with immediate family members. Over the past 24 hours, we've been in direct contact with approximately 500 additional Americans and provided specific instructions on how to get to the airport safely. For the remaining roughly 1,000 contacts that we had, who may be Americans seeking to leave Afghanistan, we're aggressively reaching out to them multiple times a day through multiple channels of communication, phone, email, text messaging, to determine whether they still want to leave and to get the most up-to-date information and instructions to them for how to do so. Some may no longer be in the country. Some may have claimed to be Americans, but turn out not to be. Some may choose to stay. We'll continue to try to identify the status and plans of these people in the coming days.
A sense of just how complicated this really is. And that comes after urgent pleas from Congress to do whatever it takes to get people out, even if that means blowing past the August 31st deadline. The Washington Post reporting House lawmakers Tuesday urged the Secretaries of State and Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Director of National Intelligence to appeal to President Biden to reconsider plans to stick with August 31st for the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan if more Americans and Afghans eligible for extraction are still on the ground. Both Republicans and Democrats agreed that if there are still American citizens left in Afghanistan trying to escape, the United States should not stick to the deadline, regardless of the risk involved in staying. And in the midst of what is turning out to be a Herculean effort currently underway in Afghanistan, two congressmen, Democrat Seth Moulton and Republican Peter Meijer, making an unauthorized and controversial trip to Kabul. In a joint statement, the two congressmen say, after talking with commanders on the ground today and seeing the situation for ourselves, it is obvious that because we started the evacuation so late, no matter what we do, we won't get everyone out on time, even by 9/11. Their trip is drawing significant blowback here at home. Speaker Pelosi today warning her caucus against following in their footsteps.
The resources necessary to facilitate their visit and to protect them was an opportunity cost of what we needed to do to be evacuating as many people as possible. The point is that we didn't want anybody to think this was a good idea and that they should try to follow suit. It was not, in my view, a good idea.
Joining us now, Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Obama, and Evelyn Farkas, who has held several positions at the Pentagon, most recently as former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia. Both Ben and Evelyn, MSNBC contributors. Evelyn, you've been in communication with people inside the administration, and you were generous enough to share with us part of what it is that you have shared with them. And you write, I am afraid if you don't extend the date, the political blowback will be worse than it already is. It seems to me that we should be able to deter the Taliban, given our military power, and we have the carrots that you have been speaking about publicly, namely the money. I know it's a tough call to make, but I guess I would counsel standing up to the Taliban. Okay, explain what that confrontation would look like and why you believe it would be worthwhile.
Well, so, Alicia, obviously, the administration is in a real bind here. I mean, they're working overtime to try to get as many Americans out. And then, of course, Afghan allies. Sounds like they're making a lot of progress on the Americans. They have to weigh the risk. And they are getting real intelligence that either the Taliban or other assets, I think it's ISIS, affiliated groups, are ready, willing, and able to attack at at a level that's alarming. So I don't have access to that intelligence, and I don't want to guess about it on national television, but it's obviously something they have to balance. On the other hand, we have the commitments to our citizens and to the Afghans who have worked with us. Many of them have paperwork to come to the United States or to other allied countries. Many Americans, such as myself, civilians, but really a lot of our veterans and NGOs have been actively trying to help the U.S. government and allied governments get some of these Afghans out. And it's just, frankly speaking, a mess on the ground. And so my advice is to try to push back on the Taliban with the preponderance of military power that we have to use our power, our deterrence, as well as the carrots that we can offer, which is, of course, the assistance that they would like from the international community and from the United States, to tell the Taliban that whether you like it or not, we're going to do this for several more days. And there are precedents in history. We had an air bridge during communism, to Berlin, that we didn't ask the Soviet Union for permission to run it. So if we have the will, I think we can push back. But of course, the administration has to be willing to take some risk, and there is risk to American personnel.
Ben, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that ISIS poses an acute threat to America's evacuation mission. Can you help us understand how and why that is?
Well, I think there are two risks here when it comes to ISIS. The first is that you could have an attack on people trying to get into the airport, which would obviously lead to not only a tragic loss of life potentially, but also kind of further chaos in what is already an incredibly difficult situation. I think the other risk is that all manner of groups, including ISIS affiliates, may want to be perceived as kind of shooting at the United States on the way out to kind of gain the prestige of them kind of chasing us out. So these are very real risks that have to be taken into account. I think, though, Evelyn's right that, look, every day that we're evacuating these people, you have to think of this potentially as literally saving lives, people who could be killed if they stay behind. And the only time that we have to get them out, Afghans, Americans, is right now with the presence on the ground. As soon as we're gone, the window is shut, closed on a lot of these people. And they're left with the arduous choice of whether they try to get to the border of Pakistan or Iran. So there are risks every day that we're there, but this is the only window we have to make good the promises that we made to Afghans who served with our military, who set up human rights organizations, and of course, to American citizens who are over there. So, look, it's a difficult and challenging set of circumstances. But again, I think, once we're gone, and those people don't have the lifeline that they currently have.
Right. And Evelyn, just to underscore how complicated this all is, according to the New York Times, it's not entirely clear how many people in Afghanistan still need to be evacuated. They write, U.S. officials believe that thousands of Americans remain in Afghanistan, including some far beyond Kabul, without safe or fast way to get to the airport. Tens of thousands of Afghans who worked for the U.S. government over the last 20 years and are eligible for special visas are desperate to leave. And refugee and resettlement experts estimate that at least 300,000 Afghans are in imminent danger of being targeted by the Taliban for associating with Americans and U.S. efforts to stabilize Afghanistan. Evelyn, is it possible to get this many people out in time, especially because it seems that we don't know exactly the number of people who need to be flown out?
Well, Alicia, given this artificial deadline of the 31st, which is actually not the 31st, right? I'm hearing that right now they're not taking any more people onto the airport grounds, that all the gates are closed. I'm hearing that real time from Kabul. So if that's the case, we don't have any more time. I think the reality is that, sadly, we're not going to be able to take everyone who has the right to come out. American citizens will be left behind. Some of them are having problems with their paperwork, which is crazy. And many of them, of course, are beyond Kabul. We're also not going to be able to take out all of the Afghans who are qualified. It's just a reality now. But I'm going to, double down on what I said earlier and agree with Ben. I think now is the time. We have to use the window we have now to get as many people out. And I think it's really important. I just want to underscore again, to Americans, to American veterans, to American NGO people, I think widely speaking, across the board, people felt, the American public felt, including veterans, including NGOs who had worked in Afghanistan, that it was time to leave. That's not the issue. The issue is how we left, and people want to get as many people out as possible. And I think if the administration can find a way to push the envelope beyond the 31st and get more people out. Of course, it's not going to get everyone out, but it will go a long way towards, I think, helping alleviate the crisis of confidence and the moral anguish people are feeling right now.
Ben, before I let you go, I do want to get your take on these two members of Congress taking this trip to Kabul.
Well, look, I completely understand the frustration of people in the administration and Speaker Pelosi that inserting yourself in an incredibly complicated evacuation operation is not constructive. I do think we have to look at this, though, and recognize that these are two veterans and that there's real anguish in that community over the fate of Afghans who worked with them, who literally saved their lives. And so, again, I would certainly echo the advice that, flying into a very complicated and fraught evacuation is not the most constructive use of a member of Congress's time right now. But I also think that we should take the extremes that these two members went to as a signal of the point of view of a lot of post 9/11 veterans that, as we were just talking about, like, we have to do everything we can to get as many of these people out because these people sacrificed and served alongside us for so many years.